LinkedIn News.
I'm used to in my life kind of muscling my way through, and I'll work as hard as you tell me I need to work to overcome this obstacle and, surpass this barrier and what have you. And when it comes to creating a family, no amount of hard work or will gets you the result that you want, And that was I think it's humbling for anyone who goes through that kind of experience, but you really do feel out of control. And, unfortunately, when our surrogate was pregnant again, this time with identical twin girls, she miscarried again. And so I was thinking about this mantra that's really widespread. And it's the idea that while you can't control what happens to you, you can control your reaction to what happens. It sounds really nice on its face, but in that moment, I was like, can someone tell me how to change my reaction? It's not like there's a little switch in my brain that I can just flip on and off. Yep, there we go.
That's Maya Shankar, cognitive scientist and host of the podcast, A Slight Change of Plans. And this is Everyday Better. Stay tuned for my conversation with Maya about how to navigate change as part of our Back to School for Adults series. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you want to hang out with me more, you can find me on socials. Finally, if you like this conversation, I have a favor to ask of you. Leave us a review wherever you're listening to the show so we can keep bringing you more conversations that you love. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, this is Everyday Better, a show about the tools you need to create positive change in your mindset, your work, and every other area of your life. I'm Leah Smart, LinkedIn's senior editor and a certified professional coach. I help people become better versions of themselves one day at a time. And every week, I sit down with a trusted voice, so together, you and I can explore how to take small steps toward big changes, the kind we planned for, strive toward, or never saw coming. I don't know about you, but learning how to deal with big changes and uncertainty has been one of the biggest hurdles of my adult life. I am a planner, but only because my brain likes to pretend it can predict every single thing that's coming. And yet changes that I expected but am unsure of the entirety of their impact, like my baby girl, are happy and exciting. But some others aren't. And those are the ones that a lot of us have an especially difficult time with. So how do we deal with unexpected and unwanted change? Today, in honor of back to school season, I'm bringing you an episode with cognitive scientist Maya Shankar to teach us lessons about navigating change that, frankly, I believe we should have learned way back in the day in school. This episode is part of my larger September series around all the things we didn't learn in school but should have. Last week, we talked to psychotherapist Esther Perel about our personal relationship to our work life and to our colleagues. And in the coming weeks, we'll be talking with guests Gretchen Rubin about making grown-up decisions and mindfulness expert Case Kenny about the essential skill of optimism. So stay tuned for all of that. But back to today with Maya. I find that a lot of the experts I talk to choose their field of study because of something that happened in their own lives. Their research benefits all of us, but it's also me-search, as we call it. And like many of us, Maya has been through planned and unplanned changes in her life. She's made some big professional pivots, from aspiring classical violinist to cognitive scientist to a senior advisor in the Obama White House, and now senior director of behavioral economics at Google. And she struggled with her own identity amidst unwanted and heartbreaking change in her personal life. Her work and her forthcoming book are all about what happens to us when the unexpected happens and who we become on the other side. Here's Maya.
What I focus on in my work is how the somewhat sudden and unexpected changes that occur in our lives can accelerate internal transformations in ways that we simply can't predict. And I'm most interested in the kind of change that happens in our lives that feels very scary and that we feel very unprepared for. I got into this line of work as a cognitive scientist because I myself am really terrified of that kind of unexpected change, in large part because I hate uncertainty. I feel so uncomfortable when I can't make the 2-year plan and the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan. And I want to know exactly how next week will turn out and the week after. Over time, I've slowly loosened my grip, but by nature, I love knowing how the story is going to end. And any uncertainty in that storyline makes me feel deeply uncomfortable and fills me with a sense of unease. And there's a study that I resonate a lot with, and I wonder, Leah, if you resonate with this as well, showing that people are more stressed when they're told they have a 50% chance of getting an electric shock than when they're told they have a 100% chance of getting an electric shock. So we would rather be certain that a negative thing is going to happen than to have to wrestle with any ambiguity or uncertainty. One thing that I find very reassuring, because I am so afraid of change, is reminding myself, to your earlier point, that the person that I'm going to be on the other side of change will actually be a different person than the person I am right now. And so even if I feel wildly ill-prepared to deal with what curveball life has thrown my way, that doesn't mean that the Maya on the other side of change will be equally ill-prepared, right? She will be a person with new perspectives, new abilities, new values, and shaped in ways that I simply can't predict right now. And I hope that's of comfort to people, because the reminder that we are always changing can give us hope in those moments when we simply feel despair.
I love that you share that study. I'm laughing because I'd probably be the person who's like, okay, 100% chance. Give me the shock now. I don't even want to wait for when it is. Like, that's the other uncertainty.
Exactly.
It's coming
Same
what
page,
time?
Girl, same page.
So I am the same, and we're working on it. Part of the question I have about change is, in our early life, there are so many marked moments of change. So, it's like you're a baby, and then you're a toddler, and then you're a little kid, and then you move into adolescence and puberty, and then you go to college. And there are all these physical, but then also like social experiences that change us. So it's very much expected that like we're going to change. But then I wonder, someone drew me a chart once. It was a graph that was like, the longer your life is, the less surprise you have throughout life. And so it was like the first 25 years of life are this like crazy jagged thing of like all the surprises you have. And then the expectation perhaps is that less surprise comes after, say, 30, right? Like, we aren't really expecting surprise in the same way that it's kind of engineered in our younger years and change. And I wonder if you have a sense on the impact of that kind of social expectation or societal expectation on our understanding of the fact that we will be different in 10 years.
I think you're absolutely right? When we're growing up, life is full of developmental transitions, societally imposed transitions. And I think as adults, a lot of times we associate unexpected change not with delightful surprise, but with often negativity. I personally am not craving a bunch of unexpected things to happen in my life at this stage. I'm sort of like, okay, can we just keep things peaceful for a while? And so when those things do sprout up, they can be really harrowing, right? Illness, loss of a job, a friend gets hurt in a car accident, you discover something shocking about a loved one, a relationship ends, right? These are all really challenging moments to navigate, and it can really feel like our world has been just flipped upside down in a moment, right? And that we've lost our bearings. And it's so interesting, to get personal for a moment. One of the reasons why I got interested in the topic of change is that back in 2020, after years of navigating fertility challenges and kind of the emotional and physical and financial burden of that whole space, my husband and I got the great news that our surrogate was pregnant with our baby girl, and we were just over the moon. And then really tragically, she miscarried. And I remember so acutely in that moment thinking, I study this stuff, and yet it feels like it's all falling short for me right now, because I found myself completely reeling. And I was reeling in large part because I felt like there was nothing that I could do in that moment to get my hands back on the steering wheel. I'm used to, in my life, kind of muscling my way through, and I'll work as hard as you tell me I need to work to overcome this obstacle and, surpass this barrier and what have you. And when it comes to creating a family, no amount of hard work or will gets you the result that you want, And that was I think it's humbling for anyone who goes through that kind of experience, but you really do feel out of control. And, unfortunately, when our surrogate was pregnant again, this time with identical twin girls, she miscarried again. And so we had this really fraught journey. It led me to start my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, because I felt in that moment like I just needed answers. Like I needed to talk to people who had been through changes that were wildly unexpected or that were just really emotionally challenging, and to figure out how it is that they were navigating change. I wanted to marry what I knew from the science of the mind with storytelling, because I felt like that was going to be the powerful combination that was going to give me insight into, quote, how to do change better, if you will. I think so much of my work since then has been to achieve the following goals. So when this first happened to me, there was this mantra that I'd heard that's really widespread. And it's the idea that while you can't control what happens to you, you can control your reaction to what happens. And it sounds really nice on its face. It sounds very empowering. But in that moment, I was at a loss as to how to actually think and feel differently about my change. I was like, can someone tell me how to change my reaction? It's not like there's a little switch in my brain that I can just flip on and off. Yep, there we go. And so my work with A Slight Change of Plans, and then also my new book that I've written that's coming out, which is actually called The Other Side of Change, Who We Become When Life Makes Other Plans, is trying to pull together a companion for people who are in the throes of this turmoil and want to feel and think differently about their change, but don't exactly know how to. And I was hoping to kind of pull the curtain back and try to give people insight into those who have figured it out, right? Scientists and storytellers alike, so that we can have a guide that we can use moving forward. And it's funny, as I was writing my book, at the end, I wanted to sort of synthesize all the insights. And Leah actually called it a change survival kit. So I have this little, it's almost like a tear out. You can bring it along with you. It's like, okay, these are the sorts of questions you can ask. And these are the sorts of psychological techniques you can ask, because I do feel like in these moments, we're so overwhelmed. We just want to, it's not even like we need to feel better all the time, because better almost feels so out of reach. We just want to feel differently, because that itself is freeing when you're so stuck in a really negative loop. And so that's really what I've been after in all of the work that I've done in this space.
Wow. I mean, I as I'm hearing you talk about this, number one, I'm acknowledging that, like, oh my gosh, you have been through it with the parenting fertility journey. Not just the journey, but also, I imagine, the way that it rocks or has rocked your sense of identity, because we've all thought of things that were like, oh, this is how it will look. And then to the point of the subtitle of your book, Life Makes Other Plans, then we have to deal with the fact that we have this baked sense of identity. And it makes me wonder why we even create some of these identities when there is so much uncertainty and we don't always know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love that you brought this up, because it's also reminding me that when I first started in this space exploring change, I thought it was about the changes that happened to us. And probably within a year of making my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, I was like, oh my God. I was going on a walk, I remember, and I realized, oh my God, this show is actually about identity. And I hadn't connected those dots earlier, but it occurred to me in this moment that the reason why change can be as scary as it is yes, absolutely, it's uncertainty, but also it can be a huge threat to our sense of self-identity and how we define ourselves. And you said something that totally aligns with my mental model of the world, because when I think back to little Maya, the first identity I ever attached myself to was future mom. Like, My dad and mom remember I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I loved growing up in a big family. There was so much bustle, and I dreamed of having a big family of my own one day. And my parents said that when I was really little, I had my kitchen playset with the plastic phone on the side, and they would overhear me having conversations with my fictitious neighbors, or I'd be like, I know, isn't Bobby such a nightmare?
Oh my
I would be
God.
going on about my rambunctious kids. I don't know why his name was
Hilarious.
Bobby. I could have gone with an Indian name, but I was trying to
Whatever.
assimilate at the time.
Correct.
And so that felt so central to who I was. And when we got news that, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. When we got the news that this dream of mine wasn't going to happen in both instances, I really felt like I was losing a part of myself. I was losing what had defined me, what currently defines me, and then what defined my future. And by the way, I had a version of this as a young child in another domain. I was an aspiring concert violinist, and I had a hand injury that overnight ended my dreams of becoming a concert violinist. And I had felt kind of a similar grief. It was not nearly as intense, I think, as the grief I experienced in the motherhood realm, but I certainly felt like when I lost the violin, I wasn't just losing an instrument, I was losing who I was fundamentally. And I think when we anchor ourselves to something so tightly, we run the risk of having a very destabilizing experience if that thing is taken away. And, you had asked, like, why do we do this? Well, I think it's just sort of a primal instinct to want to carry identities, right? There's a lot of upside to having identities. They give us a sense of purpose and meaning and things to aspire for and a big sense of community, right? If I identify as an athlete, I now feel camaraderie with my fellow athletes, right? If I'm a mother, I feel camaraderie with my fellow parents, so there's a lot of upside to that. But the downside is that if you anchor your identity too tightly to that one thing, then you're setting yourself up for failure if it goes away. And I'll share one lesson that I chronicle in my book with you in case it helps people who are going through this sort of identity crisis on the other side of change, which is we can have identities that are multifold, of course. And I would urge everyone to try to engage in what's called a self-affirmation exercise, where you actually list out all of the identity, all the parts of yourself that you value that are unaffected by the change. So maybe you really value your spiritual life or your friendships or your exercise routine or the meals that you cook for loved ones, right? It can be anything that brings you a feeling of self-worth and value. So that's one way to do it. But the second, which is something that I've utilized many times over since losing the violin, is to try and anchor your identity not just to what you do, but to why you do it. This was a major unlock for me. So I asked myself, what was it about the violin that I loved? Well, I loved emotionally connecting with people. I loved improving at a craft. I loved the sense of community that my musical world brought me. I didn't lose all of those things when I lost the violin. Those passions still lived inside of me. And it was just a matter of finding an expression for those passions elsewhere, right? Through other outlets. And I have actually been able to do that. In my adult life as a cognitive scientist, I'm constantly working and improving at my craft. Through my podcast and my book, I'm constantly forging emotional connections with people, which I love so much. And so if you ask yourself why you do something, that can be a North Star for you. It can be a guide as you're figuring out what your next steps look like. So yes, you've lost your ability to do X or Y, but what are the underlying features of those things that were drawing you towards it in the first place? And can you find that elsewhere?
I love that framing, that if we understand what we're craving from a goal or identity, we can recreate what we need from it emotionally somewhere else. It's a grounding mental exercise. And yet, with change comes grief. Maya and I talk about that after this short break. And we're back with cognitive scientist and author of the forthcoming book, The Other Side of Change, Maya Shankar.
There's so much grief and change. There's such a feeling of loss by definition, you're moving from an old way of being into a new way. And even if you see it as a positive change, there's still going to be some element of grief potentially, because you're leaving one city and you're moving to another, or you're leaving a job and you're moving to another, you're leaving one relationship and moving into another.
I mean, I think you can apply this literally to anything. Of course, I was thinking about, our work lives and our personal lives. And I thought about, I'm from California. I've moved to New York 2 times. And the second time I moved, I knew with every fiber of my being that I had to go. And yet I grieved. And I don't think we expect that with change, or maybe we expect it and maybe that's why we're a little scared of it. But I don't know if we know how to handle it.
Totally. I think that's totally right. And one thing that just is true about the human mind in general is that we are very bad affective forecasters. We're very bad at predicting how we will feel about some future event. And I mean, there's some reassurance there too, which is a lot of people who think something is going to be absolutely calamitous end up realizing that there was some opportunity for growth baked into that experience that they weren't expecting, or that it unlocked new abilities or new ways of seeing the world. And then on the flip side, people who are absolutely sure that some change in their lives is going to be for the good are deeply humbled because they realize, oh my gosh, that change I was imagining didn't happen in a vacuum. There were all these other parts of my life that were unexpectedly influenced by this change. And I don't actually like the new state of affairs as much as I thought I would. And how interesting is that? For example, you find that like lotto winners don't always love the aftermath. Relationships change, people come out of the woodwork asking for money. I mean, it can distort many aspects of one's life. So one piece of advice I have is to always approach change with a large degree of humility. Because you just don't always know what you're going to get, and you're not always going to be great at predicting how exactly your happiness will be affected by that change.
One thing I was going to ask you that now feels clear is, if I embrace uncertainty, am I then ambivalent about what happens in my life? Like, certainty makes me feel like I care. I care a lot, right? It's like I want to know my schedule because I care a lot. So if I'm uncertain and I'm okay with being uncertain, am I then saying I don't care?
So in psychology, there's a concept called the illusion of control, which basically says that we overestimate the degree to which we are controlling outcomes in our lives. And I certainly fall prey to the illusion of control, because when we control things, it gives us a sense of meaning and purpose, right? If you really believe you have no control over how your life ends up, yeah, you might descend into a state of nihilism and like, hey, who cares about anything? So it's very important for humans to feel some degree of agency. And of course, we do have some agency, and our inputs matter. And in some cases, they matter a lot. Now, I'm going to put aside the whole question of whether free will exists for the sake of this conversation.
That's the next
too philosophical. Yeah. So let's just assume, if I studied harder for a test, by and large, I will probably do better on that test. So it's not like our inputs don't matter. But what I think happens is when an unexpected change is thrown our way, the anvil falls from the sky, it shatters the illusion of control completely. And you're left feeling like, oh my God, I'm wildly out of control. And that is extremely disorienting. In that moment, I'm not saying, hey, relinquish all your control and just be comfortable with this horrible psychological state. What I'm actually trying to do is help people identify what remains within their control, like some of these identity affirming exercises, so that they can start to put the pieces back together and can assert control in ways that are productive, while simultaneously trying to find some greater degree of comfort with the stuff that is truly out of their control.
Do you expect people to put the pieces back together right away when they experience a change?
Absolutely not. So that really depends on the personality type, and to each their own. I mean, I really believe this. When it comes to change and grief, there is truly no one size fits all. And in fact, at the end of my book with this change survival kit, I open with the fact that not every tool will work for every person. Not every tool will work the same way for every person, given the particular change they're navigating at that moment in time. Some combination of tools might be more powerful in some cases, some might not. And of course, for some, they will just need time to process before they take any mental action items whatsoever. And so I end actually that opening section by saying, at a minimum, I hope the existence of this survival kit simply gives you hope that there is a more promising future available to you when you decide to take those steps forward, right? Just, I want you to have the confidence that it won't be a steady state of this exact way of thinking forevermore. When a big change happens to us, it can feel like a big negative change happens to us. It can feel like we're in the middle of an apocalypse, like the world that we knew has just been permanently destroyed. But the genesis of the word actually comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means revelation. And I think that's really instructive because the big changes in our lives can reveal things to us about who we are that were previously hidden from view. And so that's the hopeful message in it. I think what I can promise people is at a minimum, the experience of change will increase your understanding of self. Because in everyday life, we tend to think we have a fairly good grasp of who we are and what we're capable of. But actually, we've collected all of that data just based on the somewhat arbitrary, random set of experiences we've happened to have over time. And when you're thrust into an unexpected change, the demands and stresses of that novel experience can reveal all sorts of unexpected and sometimes astonishing things about beliefs we were carrying that we didn't even know we were carrying, but that were holding us back. And then we don't know what insecurities may lay beneath the surface. We may not know what societal norms we're carrying or pressures we feel influenced by or how we define success in our lives. I mean, all these things are sort of floating in our brains and we're not interrogating all of them all the time, right? They often just rise to the surface when we're pressure tested.
And is that then the statement you're making if I said, what is the statement you're making about the other side of change?
Yeah, I think the statement I'm making is we will become different people on the other side of change in ways we are capable of shaping. And we might often be pleasantly surprised by what we find on the other side.
That was the lovely Maya Shankar, cognitive scientist, host of the podcast A Slight Change of Plans, and author of the forthcoming book, The Other Side of Change. If you liked this episode, make sure you check out last week's with Esther Perel. You can find a link to that in the show notes. Give it a listen and let us know what you think. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Emily Reeves and Ava Ahmadbegi. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Mujib Mehdad. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is LinkedIn's editor-in-chief and vice president of content development. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.